everybody, and welcome to the session on training and consulting best practices. My name is Carmen Stanila, and together with my colleague Anna, we will take you through the session today, talking about training and consulting and sharing some examples and best practices. Anna, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Carmen. My name is Anna Kampenek. I'm the Director of Global Programs at SIPE. This session already is fairly international. I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C. Carmen is in Romania. You are in a number of countries across the continent. So it is exciting in that sense. Obviously, we wish we could see you all in person, but that's our new reality still this year. So we'll roll with it. Very excited to virtually meet everybody.
Our session will be divided roughly into two big parts. One of them is dedicated to training, and we will be talking about a lot of hopefully useful concepts and aspects of training. And then the second part will cover consulting. And let's get started, and let's see what we hope to achieve. What is our goal for today? And as good trainers will do, we have set ourselves a number of objectives. We would like you to be able at the end of our session to describe the training and consulting processes, what each of them entails. Hopefully you will be able, or at least get some ideas about how to design and deliver a training session. You will be able to build some technical skills. And finally, we hope that you will be able to recognize a variety of roles that consultants can play when they take assignments. Okay, these are our goals for today, and let's see how we can achieve them. First of all, talking about training and talking about speaking in public, because of course training, whether it's virtual or in person, is about speaking in public. We see that fear of speaking in public is a number one fear. Actually, there are polls, there are surveys that show that fear of speaking in public comes first before the fear of death. So, you know, it's kind of surprising. And of course, it comes well ahead of the fear of spiders or snakes, fear of darkness, fear of heights. Public speaking fear is the most common, the most frequent. And of course, again, there is a lot of variation in the degree of fear. Some people just are a bit nervous. For others, it's anxiety. So, as you can see here, 10% of the population is comfortable all the time. There is a variation in terms of the degree of degree of confidence in speaking and the nervousness. Over 80% of the population have some degree of fear, but of course it depends on each individual. And the first question that I ask myself is, why? Why are people afraid? Why are we afraid as humans of public speaking? How come this is so prevalent? And the reason for this comes from ancient times. It comes from our history as mankind. It has to do with the dangers that our ancestors experienced. It is about being afraid to be watched, being afraid to be in the spotlight. This is where it comes from, because in ancient times, when you were being watched, it was probably some predator that was watching you. So this is where this very ancient fear is coming from. Of course, now we are no longer in that danger. No predator is there to kill us or eat us alive or hurt us in any way. But our brain still remembers this danger that our ancestors faced. And the part of our brain that is responsible for responses to that kind of situations is the amygdala. It helps us respond to danger. So our brains basically have transferred this ancient fear of being watched onto public speaking. And we look at it without being aware. Of course, we look at it as a sort of attack. And that is why some of the reactions of people who experience fear of public speaking are trembling, shaking, shortness of breath. You know, the kinds of reactions, the face is turning red, the kinds of reactions that we experience when we are faced with danger. And what does this mean in public speaking? How are we behaving? Well, some of us want to hide, you know, we hide behind the podium. If we speak in public and we are in front of an audience, if there is a podium, we grab the podium very well. Please, please, please. And we are shaking like this, you know, give me a podium so that I can hide behind it or under it. So what can we do? How can we overcome this fear? Do we hide behind the podium or not? Well, there are several ways to conquer this fear of public speaking, and I have listed here a number of tools and techniques. Of course, it's important to know what you're talking about. This is your number one help when you want to conquer your fear. Okay, knowing your topic well, but then also knowing who you will be speaking with. It's a different story if you are talking to a group of people who are not familiar with your topic, or you are talking with experts in that field. The level of knowledge, the tools that you will use, the examples probably will be very different. One technique or one method that is not going to fail ever is preparation. Of course, we all know that preparation is key. If you prepare, if you go through your content, if you think about all the aspects related to your session, virtual or in person, that you need to consider, you know, lighting, temperature, internet connection, aids, visual aids, and so on, many other things. Of course, when you think about them and you prepare, you have a better chance to master your anxiety or your fear. One other thing that is very helpful is breathing. Taking a deep breath, taking deep breaths before you are about to speak. This will help you calm down. This will be very useful. Then, if you are talking in an offline setting, in-person session, of course, looking at the people, looking at them, and ideally finding a friendly face in your audience. This is a bit harder when you are doing your virtual trainings, because sometimes people turn off their cameras and you don't see the participants, so you cannot possibly look in their eyes. In-person sessions, looking in the people's eyes and especially finding a friendly face will be very helpful. And I'll give you an example. Speaking about friendly faces, my first boss when I started working with SIPE, which is a long time ago, he was a gentleman named Mark McCord. And before working with SIPE, he was leading chambers of commerce in the state of Colorado in the US. And he was telling us about the fact that he asked his assistant to sit in the front row of the conference room. And she was his friendly face in the audience when he was speaking. And he would look at her and she will do like this. Yeah, yes, yes, right. So she was his friendly face in the audience. And this was very helpful because, this gave him confidence. Yes, I'm doing well. No fear, no need to fear. Another element which I think is important to think about in terms of conquering our fear is what is our attitude? How are we visualizing our result? Is it, oh my God, they will not like it. Oh my God, what am I saying? Oh my God. Or is it, I am sharing some knowledge here. I want to help people be familiar with my topic, understand why consulting is important, why compliance consulting is important, why would they need compliance in their companies or in their organizations. So how are you looking at your result? I am imparting knowledge and I am doing a good job sharing what I know with others, or being very fearful. If you think about the result of your presentation in positive terms, this will help you calm down, and it will it will make you feel better and less anxious about your training and your session.
Carmen, if I may, before we move on, if you wouldn't mind going back to the other slide for a moment. There's a helpful mnemonic device to summarize some of the key points you mentioned here. That's called 5 S's of public speaking. And before you go into training, you can just do a quick self-check. So number 1 is stance. So that's gripping the podium or not. But also even if there's no podium, just think how you look. Are you sort of scrunched up, hunched over, kind of almost wanting to curl into a little ball? That doesn't communicate confidence, right? So take some space, make large movements with your arms when you're talking, to be present. The other one is, sound, of course. And that's an issue I struggle with. I'm not naturally a very loud person, and yet the very basic criterion for whether a training is successful or not is people have to be able to hear what it is you're saying. So even if you're saying the most brilliant things, but you're whispering so that only the person in the first row can hear you, and maybe not even that person, then obviously probably the general reception of the training will not be so good. So work on your vocal quality. Obviously, ideally we have microphones if it's a live training, but sometimes we don't. So we have to be prepared to really project. Sight, Carmen also mentioned that already, trying to look people in the eye. I know some of us may be a little bit shy. Maybe we don't like looking people in the eye. You can just look at the forehead. They will never know the difference. It still feels like looking somebody in the eye. Then we have smile, right? We talked about it as well. So just brighten the room with your smile, be friendly, have that friendly face. And then the last one is silence, which goes back to what Carmen mentioned about breathing, but don't just take one breath before the presentation begins and then be out of breath for the rest of it. Sometimes we feel a lot of pressure to fill the air, so to speak. Like, on the radio, you cannot have radio silence, but we're not on the radio. Training is different. It's okay to have a moment of silence. If you need to gather your thoughts, if you need to take the deep breath, it's okay. And also, in fact, use the silence strategically to emphasize important points. So let's say I'm opening a session and I say, what does anti-corruption compliance mean to a business in your country? I could just jump right back in and provide the answer, my answer, but it would be much more powerful if after that I take a pause, I look around, make eye contact with everybody, and actually give people a moment to think about what you said. So don't be afraid to use silence strategically, as long as you work on not filling it with those little sounds that we tend to fall back onto and we're not sure what to say. It's better just to say nothing, keep it silent, take a moment to gather your thoughts, or just allow people a moment to ponder what you told them. Thank you so much. Back to you.
Thank you, Anna. This is great. Yes, indeed. Silence can be very, very powerful in training, and we shouldn't be afraid to use it whenever we feel there is a need for that. Now, continuing with our training, what does it take? In order to conduct a training, it takes several things. I listed here some of them. Of course, education and knowledge about your topic, but also knowledge about your audience. It takes training skills, and this is what SIPE is aiming to help you build through this session and the other sessions in the training of trainers program this year. Then it takes experience and attitude. And I would like to spend just a little bit of time here. One thing, talking about education and knowledge. Usually, when I start a session, I am interested to know what is the level of knowledge of the participants regarding my topic. How experienced, how familiar are they with it? And of course, who they are. But why knowledge and experience? Because it helps me develop the content of my training session. This is very important. And if I haven't had a chance, or if I had the chance, but I would still like to start the session in a nice and engaging way, sometimes I start with questions for the participants. Before anything else, before going into the content itself, I would engage with them with questions. In a virtual setting, of course, you can prepare a poll, a few questions to understand who they are, to understand, for instance, the number of years of experience they have as trainers, or the number of years or the number of assignments they have conducted as consultants. This will help you understand who your audience is, but it helps you build on this down the road during your session. So we need to know who they are, but also we need to have information, to have knowledge about the topics that we will be covering in our sessions, that we'll be training on. In terms of attitude, I would like to spend just one moment here. What do I mean by attitude in the case of trainer requirements? What kind of attitude? Well, first of all, an open attitude, which is reflected both in how you stand, what is your posture, as Anna was describing a moment ago. If you have an open posture with your arms wide open, or you are crossing your arms, the participants, you are creating a distance between you and your participants. So open, both physically in your posture, but also open in terms of open to the participants' ideas, open to hear what the participants have to say. Another thing which I find important is how you position yourself as a trainer in relation with your participants. Every participant, especially when we are talking about training, adult learning education, every participant comes with his or her own experience. They come with their own knowledge, with their own ideas about the topic. In our case, some of you have a lot of experience probably as trainers. Maybe you could be teaching this session together with us or instead of us, or you are there to learn from them, but also to share what you know. If your participants are experienced or not, I think we all have something to learn from each other, even if it's a training session which is attended by people who are not familiar with your topic. Even if some of you don't have training experience, trainer experience until now, we can still learn something from each other. I can still learn something from you if I listen, if I'm open enough to listen to you. And as a trainer, it's good to have this openness of mind, because you can never know everything about your topic, no matter how experienced you are. And everybody, as I said, everybody comes with their own contributions and experiences. And the last thing that I want to mention here about attitude is about what I find important is supportive attitude. You are there to share what you know, to encourage people and to support them to learn from you, to learn with you. And as I said, it's this is a joint learning opportunity. It's for them as participants, but as well as for you as a trainer. Moving on, talking about training and the training process. When we plan to develop, when we are about to develop a training session, there are a few steps to take into consideration. Now, how many steps? It depends on who you are asking. Some people, some trainers or some experts in adult education will tell you there are 8 steps. Some others will talk about 4 steps. I chose here 5 steps. The first one is to understand what your participants, what your learners need. What are their learning needs? And to think about them, to analyze those needs. And then based on what they need and based on what you think would be the best way to bridge those gaps in their to address those needs, establish learning objectives. What do you expect them to be able to do? What do you expect them to be able to improve in their work, in their activity after your training session? Based on your training objectives, based on your learning objectives, you develop your plan, you design your training, and then delivery, and finally the evaluation. And we will have an evaluation for you in some of the sessions in the Training of Trainers program that SAIP Africa developed. And of course, as we all know, evaluation can come in different shapes and forms. It can be a set of questions, it can be a quiz, it can be an evaluation form. If this training of trainers was an in-person session, ideally, we would have a session in which each of you attending this session will have the opportunity to practice, and we will provide feedback on your own training session and delivery. Or it can be another type of evaluation. Let's take each of these steps one by one. First of all, the understanding what your learners, what your trainees need. What is their need? And here the first question is why? Why do they need a training? Do they need a training, or is another method more appropriate to help address their need. What is our goal? What do we want to achieve? So again, ideally, before starting to prepare your learning objectives and then your training plan, you will have a very good understanding of what the need is and how best to address that. And here, of course, we are all familiar with a number of tools, you know, interviews. You can conduct group discussions. You can simply observe the people who you are going to train. If you can, sometimes some organizations, in some cases, we develop pre and post training surveys, and we are able to identify what are the gaps, and then we identify at the end if we manage to bridge at least a few of those gaps. Ideally, there will be a post-training evaluation several weeks or several months after as well. But the idea is to try to understand as much as possible why they need training, what is the specific need, and how best to address that. For instance, let's say that you are going to facilitate a training on compliance for a company. Okay, so maybe the organization, the company, let's say you have a new customer, which is a bank. Maybe they introduce new procedures and policies regarding anti-money laundering. So your training will have as a goal to help the people who are working at the front desk, for instance, and the people who are processing, who are who are responsible for the processing of payments, identify red flags. Be able to identify red flags and know how to handle them, how to report, and what to do about them. So ideally, you will understand what the need is, what is changed, what is the problem, why they need training, and build on this knowledge together with the knowledge about who you will be, your learners, who will be your trainees. Of course, here there are lots of things to think about. If you can gather as much information about your audience as you can. We cannot create one-size-fits-all trainings. We need to adapt the training to the characteristics of the people who will be in attendance. And here we are talking about their age. We are talking about how much they know about the topic or not, if we can. What is their work experience? Are they entry-level people? Are they members of the board? Are they senior managers? What is their level of education? And of course, what are their training needs? All these elements, all this information about the profile of your audience will influence the types of tools, the level of sophistication of the training, your learning methods, what kind of materials, aids you will use, and so on and so forth. Another thing to keep in mind, talking about your audience, is to understand why and how, especially how adult people learn. What is their motivation? What are some of the factors that shape how they learn? And besides, of course, the quality and the quality of your materials and the quality of your instruction, one thing very important is how relevant it is for them, how to what extent they will be able to use it in their work. Why? Well, the simple reason is that people learn when they see what's in it for them. Sometimes what's in it for them, they may be after a certificate. They may be interested in obtaining another diploma. I would hope that people come to the training, come to this training and come to other trainings that you will facilitate, driven by a desire to learn new skills, to learn things that will help them improve their performance, that will help them maybe advance in their careers, get promoted, and so on. Why are we learning? How relevant is the content? And also how much they will be able to apply in their work, in their activity after the training. In our case,
Carmen, if I may here, so I think you made a key point, and key point to remember is the difference between adult learners and teaching kids or even young adults in university. Some of you may have teaching experience. And I'm thinking back to one of the previous TOT sessions that we did, when, as Carmen mentioned, we had the option of participants were practicing on us. So events of the instructors became, mock trainees. And we had somebody open a session by saying, "Good morning, students." And, we were, we were taking a little bit aback because that's just, that's not the setting. And you need to make a mental adjustment here. You're not a professor delivering a lecture to a group of students. You are, a lot of what you do is actually facilitation, or as Carmen mentioned, yes, you have knowledge to impart, but also you have something to learn from the participants. And most importantly, they have a lot to learn from each other. So your job is to convey knowledge, but also to be a facilitator, much more so than you would see in an academic setting or in, teaching your kids math or something like that.
Thank you, Anna. Indeed. Another thing that adults appreciate and it motivates them to learn is the fact that they can receive feedback. They practice and they can receive feedback, which is adapted to their specific performance and helps them improve. Talking about self-directed, what is this about? It means that simply adults take the initiative. They understand what their learning needs are, and they set goals for themselves, and then they identify learning resources and use them, make use of these resources. And a training course it can be such a learning resource together with the materials and everything else that is that comes with a training course. One other element which we need to have in mind is conducive learning environment. In the sessions, how do we create such an environment? As Anna said, keeping in mind that participants learn from us, we all learn from them, and they learn among themselves by creating an open and supportive environment in which people participate, they interact among themselves, but also with us as facilitators, as trainers, where participants feel they can ask questions, they can express freely their ideas, they can contribute to the sessions. This is motivating them, especially the ones who are a bit more shy. This is motivating them to engage and to learn. Now, we are getting to the more technical part of training and talking about learning objectives. And again, we start with why. Why is a very important question. Why do we need learning objectives? And what are these about? Some of you who are more experienced trainers, you are probably very familiar with this. Well, learning objectives help us set the direction. What is it that we want to achieve in our training session? And here we can think of examples. If you are talking about a session like this one, a session on training, one of the objectives, or the objectives could be the participants will be able to design and deliver a training session. They will build skills, training skills, and hopefully confidence to facilitate a session themselves, and use some methods and techniques that will encourage participation. If we are to think in terms of learning objectives, we can divide these into three different types of learning are reflected in different types of objectives. And there are three broad categories: do, know, and feel. And these objectives that we set as trainers will be reflected in will be reflected and accompanied by a number of verbs, and they are related to a number of elements that we want the participants to take away from our training. When we talk about learning objectives, do learning objectives, we are talking about the key skills that we want to impart. And here we are talking about practical skills, we are talking about intellectual, we are talking about interpersonal skills, depending on the content of our training. And when we formulate these objectives in writing, usually they are expressed with a number of verbs. We have here some examples, and of course the list is not comprehensive. There's many more. Some examples include, like we have here: prepare, write, practice, compare, and these design, analyze. These are related to the core skills, as I said. Then we have no type of learning objectives that are related to knowledge and understanding of the concepts. And these are about the broader types of information that help the participants do a better task. For instance, if we are going back to the example that I mentioned earlier, in the case of a bank with a customer, and we are doing a training for the new employees or for the existing employees, but in case new policies have been introduced. For instance, one of our learning objectives around the know could be, after our training, the participants will be able to define the key internal control mechanisms or tools they can use and need to apply in their work. A third type of objective is related to values and attitudes, and this is centered around feel. And this is about the values and attitudes that contribute to how we approach tasks. For instance, going back again to the example with a bank that I previously mentioned, one type of objective would be, at the end of this training session, the participants will be able to appreciate the importance of introducing a compliance program, or introducing new anti-money laundering policies in the organization. So objectives around feel will be usually translated into wording that comprises verbs like appreciation, recognition, being aware of, to be aware of. Why are we even bothering with these learning objectives? Because this is what we want to achieve with our goal, with our sessions. These are the goals that we have for our session. And the more specific our goals, the better chances are that we will achieve our goals as trainers. Now, after we identify what are the needs of our learners, of our trainees, and we understand who they are as much as we can, as I said, collect information about who they are, and then decide what is our goal, what we want them to do, what do we expect them to do at the end of our session. This is where we start planning, developing, designing our training session. And the design and planning part is focused around the answer to the questions that you see on my screen. Who your target audience is, what is your purpose, what are the key learning points related, of course, to your objectives, what is your agenda, what is your session plan, and how are you going to deliver your content. And what I propose is to talk more about methodology in the live session, in the next session in February, because I think this is where we could really go into more details. Talking about what we expect to achieve and what are the learning points. Of course, when we know very well our topic and we are passionate about it, our tendency sometimes is to want to cover as much as possible about the topic, to cover all, to share everything we know with our participants, which sometimes is not feasible because we have time constraints, we have limitations. We don't have the whole day or the whole week to cover our topic. So we must be selective about what we will cover in our session. That's why the model that I propose here around must, should, and could, or good to know, helps you filter through the information that you are going to include in your session. And when we talk about must know, this is the core elements, the critical elements that that help you achieve your goal. If you don't cover these points, your learning will not be achieved. Your goal will not be achieved. Then you have should know. These are less critical aspects, less critical learning points, but still important. You would probably spend less time on them, but still mention them. And then the final one is could or good to know. Could know or good to know. These are less important elements which you don't have the time to cover. Sometimes you can just develop handouts like I have done here. I'm going to share during the next session, I'm going to share a lesson plan template with you. So templates for some of the key elements that you want to cover, but you don't have time to. And in every session, I believe we have to be strategic and to make choices about what content we are able to cover and what will be allocated less time or even put in the handouts. Now, another point that I would like to I would like to touch on talking about your design, your training session design. When we prepare our trainings, one thing to keep in mind is how much people are going to take away. How much are they going to remember from our sessions? And the more interactive the sessions, the higher chances of them remembering and using the information and the tools that we are sharing with them. Here you have some statistics, and of course I'm not going to read them because we can all read. The difference between what is called the passive methods of training or teaching and the interactive ones, I think, is very stark. It talks from it says it all. These figures say it all. Starting from 30% to 50 or even 90%. That's a huge difference. And the best way of remembering something is by teaching. So the more you teach, the best chances are that you will remember. And actually think about it like this: when you are reading something or you are watching something, the moment when you are done and you talk with somebody, you explain to somebody what you have just read or what you just watched, chances are that you are better able to remember. Your attention, your retention rate is greater than if you would just read or watched and then moved on to something else. So teaching others, this is the most effective way to remember something. So hopefully after this session you will get to practice and hopefully remember some of the things that we discussed in this session. Speaking about remembering and how much people remember or don't remember from the sessions. Another tool to help us as trainers is what is called the CPR approach, or content participation and review. And what is the idea here? This is about breaking the content into smaller pieces and allowing the learners time to reflect and to work with what we are imparting. And here, when we talk about content, this is where you introduce the topic and you share the key points, or you simply give instructions if you are preparing to conduct an exercise. Then the participation is the moment, the time where you allow the participants to work with your topic. It can be an exercise of any type. It can be a role play. It can be a small group discussion. It can be a case study that you are proposing. The participants have the opportunity to engage with the content. And then review is the final part where the groups come together, if it was a small group activity, where you discuss with the participants and get their feedback, and then you summarize and emphasize the key learning points that you had. And basically, this is a cycle. It can be 20 minutes long, it can be longer, depending on your session and your topic. The idea is to make sure that you don't have only content, but you also include activities, summary, reviews of what you have just said. Why? Because you want your participants to get your message. You want to make sure that what you are imparting, what you are sharing, what you are training, what you are teaching will be assimilated by your participants. And here, it's important to remember the fact that people are different. Everybody has their own style. there are several learning styles, and there are several models that talk about learning styles of people. And here I have selected one that was developed by Peter Honey and Alan Mumford, but there's more than one. There are several out there. And this one looks at the characteristics of 4 types of participants: activists, reflectors, theorists, and pragmatists. And what are the best tools? What are the best ways that people learn so that we as trainers would adapt our content to their characteristics and help them learn? And we are not going into a lot of details here. The main point is to remember that different people learn in different ways, and we as trainers, as facilitators, we need to be aware of those styles and to be able to incorporate different tools and techniques to make sure that we reach with our message the various people we have in the room. And of course, if we want to identify learning styles, there are several questionnaires out there. I'm sure you are familiar with some of them. Sometimes we ask the participants to take this questionnaire, and we learn more about them if we can in the preparation phase, in the pre-training phase. If not, if we don't have the luxury of conducting such a survey and learning who we will have in the room, chances are that we will have all these 4 types. And the proportion will be different, of course, from each group, from one group to the other. But knowing the difference in learning styles will help us develop and select appropriate tools and techniques. In terms of structure of the presentation, we will not go into details. I think this is something that we are all familiar with, we are all aware of. This is just a refresher. This is something that we all learned in school when we were learning to make compositions in the primary school. It's always about an introduction, announcing what you are going to talk about. Then the body of your presentation will be when you cover the key points that support your topic. And then finally a summary or a conclusion, a revision, where you tell them what you have just told them. I very much like this quote from Mark Twain about the preparation of a speech and of a presentation. Basically, here the emphasis that I want to make is on preparation, how important it is to prepare. Even if it's a short session, it will probably take hours to make sure that you are able to convey your message and to achieve your goal. And the last point that I would like to cover in this part about training is regarding the delivery. And here, one key element that I want to spend a moment on is fascipulation. This is what we as trainers, as facilitators do sometimes in our sessions. We not only train, we not only facilitate, we sometimes also manipulate a little bit, in the sense that we influence, as trainers, as facilitators, we influence the discussions by reframing, by summarizing the points that were made, the work that a group, if we were talking about small group activities, have conducted and they are presenting. And one thing that, one small trick that I would like to share from my experience from trainer to trainer, sometimes you have in your trainings one or two participants who like to talk a lot, and sometimes the points are a bit off topic. It can happen. I'm sure it has happened to you as well. Well, talking about fascipulation, if I see that they are going to Addis Ababa when they should be in Accra, they are going off topic, they are going far away from where they should be, I pick one idea or one or two concepts they are talking about, and I am using them to bring them back, to summarize or to make to highlight the point that I think is important to make. So even if the conversation went a little bit astray, I use some of what they are saying to bring it back and to make the point that I'm keen on making. So this is fascipulation in action. Two more points that I would like to make here are one about giving instructions. Giving instructions is hard, as you probably have experienced already in your training sessions. Here are some tips. One thing you can do is do not give long series of instructions. Give instructions in sequences. If you ask them to do something which involves several actions, invite them to do the first one and then stop and wait until they do it and then continue with the instructions. The chances are better that the participants will follow the instructions. And then, of course, the other one, which is key, is repeating the instructions, making sure that they understand. Sometimes when you are doing a face-to-face training, you can look at them you can see on their faces if they understood or not. But sometimes you don't. You can ask questions. Do you have questions? Is this clear? Do you want me to repeat the instructions? Or you can simply go and talk with them and see if they need further clarifications. And the second point that I wanted to make is about contingency planning. As a trainer, you will be probably faced with all kinds of unexpected situations. What is your plan B? How do you prepare? What if you are training online and you have an intruder participate unexpectedly, they crash your virtual training? What do you do then? What is your plan B? Okay, this can happen. If you are in a conference room, in an in-person training, what happens if there is no electricity suddenly? What do you do then? What if you don't have any internet? Your computer crashes. What is your plan B? How do you handle it? At this point, I would like to give the virtual baton to my colleague Anna for the remaining points regarding training and then the consulting part. Anna, please.
Thank you, Carmen. And I'll add one more fairly recent example on contingency planning in the virtual world. Especially if you have a setup like what we have right now, you have a nice deck of slides and you're sharing the presentation, you agree ahead of time, I'm presenting this part, you're presenting this part. That was exactly the situation I was in with our brilliant colleague Lola last year when we had a live session focused on compliance trends globally and what is happening in Africa specifically. Obviously, Lola is more of an expert on Africa than I am, so that's how we divided the content. But guess what? 15 minutes into the live presentation, Lola's line drops off. She's not there. I cannot say, oh, well, too bad, I guess. We'll just go through half of the presentation. And then what? So you have to, especially if you're sharing content, it's impossible for you to be necessarily an expert on what the other person was going to say. Otherwise, you could just do the whole thing. But you have to have at least convincing familiarity with the entire presentation content, with whatever the session is supposed to cover, just because if we're talking about a live session, the show must go on, and you must be prepared to take over. So let's talk a little bit more about effective training skills or trainer skills. We already covered some key points on presentations, how you come across, how you use your voice and your body to build connection with your participants. Again, to my earlier point, this is not a one-way street when you're doing training. Obviously, in a pre-recorded session, it's slightly different. But if this was a live session, it wouldn't be just me and Carmen doing the talking. We would pull you into the conversation, which she will do during the live session coming on later. And you really want to engage in active listening. So if you ask a question, actually listen to what people are saying, or maybe ask follow-up questions if necessary, so that you can tailor, you can pivot a little bit. Maybe you hear, you're planning to focus on one element of compliance more than ever. Maybe you're hearing from your participants they really need more focus on some other element of the content. So be flexible, be prepared to shift how much you focus on a given topic, depending on what your particular group is interested in, what they need. Problem solving, we talked about contingency situations, all kinds of other things can happen during the training. You have to be sort of agile, flexible, not easily flummoxed, maybe, use humor to diffuse the situation if there isn't a whole lot you can do to fix a particular problem. Conflict management, as Carmen mentioned, in every group where people who like to talk a lot, sometimes it happens that those people who like to talk a lot happen to disagree with each other on some topics. So you need to be diplomatic but forceful, or maybe suggest, this is an important issue to consider, but maybe we can move this conversation offline during the break, something like that, just so that conflict between two specific participants doesn't hijack your entire training structure. Time management, again, there are different schools of thought on things like starting on time. My philosophy is if you don't start on time, you're not being fair to people who actually showed up on time. Online, it's a little bit easier, but we know in-person training, there's always at least one person who is late. If you keep waiting for that person to start, in my view, ultimately, that's not fair to everybody else. And again, online, it's also easier just to keep an eye on sort of the timer on your computer, but make sure to stay with the bounds of what you said you would. Time management also is particularly tricky in person with breakout sessions or any kinds of breaks, because people start talking to each other and getting to know each other and getting into heated and very intriguing and very fascinating often conversations. But again, you have to have systems, maybe signals, like use a little bell or have helpers to help you corral everybody back to the main room, say if you had breakout sessions. Zoom actually makes it easier. I'm guessing by now everybody has experienced breakout sessions on Zoom. The timer just shows up, it counts down. When it's over, it's over, and you're all back into the main room. Unfortunately, that feature is not available in real life. So you have to, when you're doing in-person training, you have to account for getting people back to the main session. And then just the attitude of lifelong learning. So I may have, this wonderful training content that I love to do. I'm really expert in it. Is that good enough? Can I just be doing this one training session for the rest of my life? Well, obviously not, especially in a field like compliance. laws locally may change, international norms may be shifting, maybe some relevant development happen on the news. So you have to have the intellectual curiosity and the attitude of always learning and making your training better in terms of content, always current, always relevant. And I encourage you between now and the live session to think about other examples. What do you think effective skills for trainers are? And you'll be able to have a more interactive conversation on that with Carmen later on. Right, so we touched on training in the digital age. Here are some approaches ranging from live instruction, so that's the synchronous learning where everybody is logged in at the same time. It's a live session that's virtual. There could also be, like what we're recording now, it's really, if you just watched the video, that would be online self-study. You look at material that was pre-recorded, but because it will be followed by an interactive session in real time with Carmen, I would classify it more like as blended learning, where some of the content is delivered online and you watch it in your own time. And maybe there are some other things you do on your own offline, but then you come together during the live session. It could be virtual and could be in person, but that's the blended part. So you have the mix of online, non-interactive, and then either online or in-person interactive. Anyway, we all know digital training has its own challenges, some opportunities. I mean, it's not all bad. So how is technology changing the way we learn and train? I mean, in some ways, COVID obviously has accelerated a lot of the trends that we've seen before. I mean, we've all used collaborative learning tools, for instance, in the past, like Dropbox, Google Drive, WhatsApp groups, maybe, to maybe work on jointly on assignments, or maybe submit something electronically ahead of time that's viewable to the whole group, or maybe have a conversation on WhatsApp. Like I know we have a WhatsApp group for this training as well. So some of those tools are not new. The shift is obviously at the moment, that is in most countries, that is all we have. There's no possibility to have that conversation person to person. Also, well, in both online and offline, I would say, in recent years, there has been a shift in attention from passive to active, precisely because of the factors we discussed earlier with adult learning. Adults don't come to a training session to be lectured to, they come to get something out of it. And what they're getting out of it needs to be very clear for them to stay engaged. So there's a lot of emphasis on matching the needs and interests of the participants. And, there are ways of doing it online, obviously similar to live setting. You can have a conversation at the beginning of the session where everybody introduces themselves, maybe says a little bit about their work and their interests or expectations for the training. In the virtual world, you can do it even more easily or quickly if you don't have time for everybody to go around and introduce themselves speaking. You can just say, hey, in the chat, can everybody please put down your name, the country where you're in, 3 things you want to get out of the session. And then as a trainer, it gives you a very quick, you're not have a class on introduction, but you have a very quick overview who the participants are, where they are coming from, what they're interested in. And it also helps you with differentiated instruction, which again, it's not a technology specific concept. It's just the concept of, because we have those different types of learners and also people with different backgrounds or levels of knowledge of a particular topic, you have to tailor the content so that everybody feels like they are getting something out of it. They may not be getting the same thing out of it, but they are getting something of value out of the session. multitasking, that's a huge one with technology. And it's actually very hard to do if you're, I mean, it's hard to do training as a single person anyway. It takes a lot out of you, just, stamina wise, to be sort of on top of a entire session. But especially virtually, there's sort of added things going on. So, you may be developing content at the same time people are putting questions in the chat. At the same time, maybe, somebody was kicked out and they're trying to get in and you need to admit them, or somebody is complaining that they cannot connect through email and you're glancing at your email. So if at all possible, it helps to have support. So, well, first of all, ideally, split your training with somebody else if you can. It makes it just easier on you. But also on the technical level, right now with us, we have a wonderful colleague, Ima Bang, who is also logged in, and she's there just in case we have a technical issue or, connection goes down or something happens. You have that person to help you. Or if it was a live session, maybe it would be somebody who can help monitor questions or help monitor for very, that's a crucial point that Carmen made. Make sure that nobody who was not invited logs in and maybe starts making trouble. If you've experienced Zoom bombing, you know what I'm talking about. It's not pleasant. As a facilitator, as a trainer, you certainly do not want to be in that situation. So get help, get support if at all possible. Some prerequisites, we don't have to spend a lot of time on those essentials. We are fairly self-explanatory. Obviously, technology, have a reliable computer, have a reliable, as much as you can, internet connection, headsets. I mean, you would think by now most people learned that lesson. Trust me, they have not. I'm still in so many sessions where people do not have headsets, for all kinds of echoes. And especially if we are all in our homes doing this, especially if you have kids or a dog, if you're wearing a headset, even if there is background noise, it's not that bad. It's understandable. Not all of us can be in absolute silence, but if you don't have a headset, then everything that's happening in the background, your audience can hear it, and it can be an investment, but it's a money well spent to get a good headset. Back to thinking about who are you working with? What's the size of your group online? Obviously, if you're talking to 10 people and there's time to have more interactions where you actually yield the floor to somebody else and they can speak. It's much more interactive. If you're talking to 50 people, that may not be possible. So then you may want to explore things like Zoom breakout rooms, or maybe some of more blended approaches where you talk with the whole group for some time period and then give them a task to do, and then you reconvene later and go over the tasks that they did individually, or maybe in groups, but not through Zoom, but maybe they worked on something together in Google Docs, for instance. Maybe they were developing a mock code of ethics for a hypothetical company, something like that. Use interactive features as much as possible. We were speaking with Carmen before a session. It's a shame we cannot really do it here, but rest assured, she will show you some interactive features during the live session. A very simple one is polling, where you can quickly ask a question to the group and get feedback on something. Chat function, of course, is also helpful and less disruptive. If you ask, are there any questions, sometimes again, it can be hijacked by those two people who really like to talk, and then their questions will take up a lot of time. If you say, hey, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat throughout the session, then you can facilitate. Maybe some questions are just off the wall, not relevant to what you're talking about. So you get to pick, and you may not have time to cover all the questions. So you can pick, what are the must category questions that you actually want to address for the benefit of the whole group. And also, in the chat or on some other discussion board, that's an opportunity also for participants to have a little bit of an interaction with each other, which would be natural in a physical space where maybe they are sitting around one table, but obviously you don't get that online. So giving them some time also to get to know each other, to work on some kind of project together, mini project, mini assignment in this virtual setting is also important. And personalized experience as much as possible, especially if it's a smaller group. Make sure to acknowledge people, refer to them by their first name, thank them for their participation. Make sure that they feel, again, that this is a two-way street and that, it's not like watching a documentary. You are actually part of the experience. You're co-creating the experience. All right. Virtual learning best practices, not terribly different necessarily from just learning practices, virtual or not. We just talked about the need for engagement and being proactive about it. So encourage people to ask questions, encourage them to share their stories, practical experiences. And actually in an online setting, it may be a little bit easier for some people. Not everybody is a sort of an extrovert who would necessarily raise their hand to speak in a physical setting, but actually online, they're maybe more comfortable putting something in the chat, describing their experience without sort of feeling like they are put on the spot to say something if they are not quite comfortable with it. Pacing matters, especially in a virtual setting. It's just tiring. I mean, we've all been to so many online sessions where it's just dragging. I mean, it's torture, right? And you want this very slow speaking presenter who makes a long pause after every other word. You really want them to pick up, right? So have some energy, bring some pace, some excitement into the presentation, which again, you always should do it in under any circumstances, but it's even more important or online, where I think our attention span really suffers from just staring at screens as opposed to being surrounded by other human beings in a physical space. Prepare and integrate real stories. That's crucial. And again, in the live session, I'm hoping we'll get a lot of stories also out of you. What is your experience with training, consulting? If you haven't done it, tell us about the training you attended as a participant and that you liked. What was it about it that you enjoyed? So always make it practical, always connect it to real life. And again, have some examples ready from your own experience, but also solicit examples from your participants. Creating a comfortable online experience. Again, step number one, we talked about it, make sure it's a safe experience. So don't do irresponsible things with, sharing the Zoom link, for instance, publicly. If it's a closed session, the link should only go to people who actually registered. And that's especially good to keep in mind if you're using, in addition to doing paid training or consulting engagements, if as part of your marketing session you do your strategy, you do some free public sessions, right? You may consider that, where maybe you just introduce the topic of compliance briefly, and it's sort of a little bit of a taste and a teaser, and you're hoping people who come to the free session will later engage you on remunerated basis. Well, how you advertise that is very important, because if you just put that link on Facebook, then you are almost guaranteed that you're asking for it, as they say, that somebody will try to Zoom bomb you. So make sure to always require pre-registration, and maybe and share just link to the registration, not the raw link. You may also consider requiring passwords, for instance, just to, for added security. But making it comfortable otherwise, again, having some ground rules helps. Usually in physical training session, you would see that one of the first things that the trainer would do is put some ground rules that we all agree on before we go into the session. So things like cell phones off, or be respectful. We can have similar rules for online interactions. A big one that, again, you would think people would learn by now, but it's still not happening. In every session I've been to, somebody doesn't mute themselves, and then you hear, the radio, or again, the kid crying or something like that. So that would be, one useful rule for virtual sessions would be, let's agree that unless we're speaking, we're muted. And then make sure, obviously, that you have, you should be the administrator if you're sending the link, but that you have the technical capability of muting somebody who is not muted. And then, again, to me, part of having a comfortable online experience is also stepping away from it to take breaks, because we don't just learn with our brains, or maybe we do, but for brain to be able to absorb, your whole body needs to feel good, relaxed. If you've had people sitting for 2 hours in a chair and you expect them to still pay attention, you didn't give them any breaks, you didn't give them an opportunity to stretch, move around, they will fade away very quickly. That's, again, true both online and offline, but online makes that more a priority for me, to make sure that people are just comfortable physically. And expand the learning, right? So you always want to have something extra so that people can extend their learning experience beyond just the virtual session. Carmen mentioned she will be giving you handouts. That's one example. We'll have a list of resources at the end of this session. So things like that people can take with them beyond the actual virtual time they spend with you. Post-training evaluation. Again, you always want to get a sense of how you did, and you want that sense to be somewhat objective. In our own minds, we usually think we did great. Or maybe if we're pessimists, we always think we did terrible. So I assure you, whichever end of the spectrum you're on, you're probably not quite correct. And the objective measure is, somewhere in between. So you want to find out where you are. In a physical setting, of course, we may have something like a survey that you deliver right there before people leave. And you usually, in that survey, would want to capture two things. One would be the overall reaction. So kind of, thumbs up or thumbs down overall. Did you like the training? Did you feel it was valuable or not? And then you can get into questions that are more specific to learning objectives. So you can ask, maybe, test the knowledge a little bit, like you can, give them multiple choice questions, or for more subjective assessment, you can give them a scale question, like, before this training, I felt, how would you rate your knowledge of, internal audit procedures? After this training, how would you rate it? And of course, there's a way to do it online as well. Reaction is easy. Probably the easiest way would be to do a poll with a general question like that. Also, many people, even without you asking them, spontaneously, especially in a smaller group, would start at the end writing, thank yous, or this was great in the chat. Most people are polite, so usually just the people who enjoyed the session will do it. Although you may get somebody who, just really hated it and will say it in the chat. So that's not pleasant, but it may happen. But, so this is sort of a quick metric of sort of taking the temperature afterwards and seeing if people liked it or not, big picture. For learning, you can also follow up maybe with an electronic survey in something like SurveyMonkey, where you ask those more detailed questions about the knowledge or the skills that you wanted them to get out of the session. Now, behavior, that's really hard you cannot really measure that right after the workshop. You have to allow some time to pass, and presumably you're in touch with your participants. So maybe a few weeks after the training, you want to follow up with them. It could be a survey, maybe it could be just a quick phone conversation, just to get a sense. So, hey, we talked about developing anti-corruption policy, and you said you were hoping that you can go back to your company and develop one. Have you taken any steps toward it? So, sort of, did they take the concepts or the skills from the training, and are they applying it? And then, obviously, ultimately, maybe even in a longer term, that's more of a longitudinal study when you go back several months after the training and ask about not just sort of behavior, specific things people did, like, did they develop a policy or did they train their own staff on compliance, but sort of results, like, do you see larger changes in your company that are happening as a result of you applying the concepts and the skills from this training? So that's the ultimate impact. And so this was what we're looking at. It's called Kirkpatrick model. A similar one comes from another consultant. His name is Kaufman. And again, this evaluates resources or materials and processes that you use during the training, that people find them interesting, that they find them effective. And then knowledge acquisition. So again, did they grasp some concept or skills that you wanted them to learn? And then the later ones get into application from the perspective of time of what they learned during the training, organizational results. The last one is a little big picture, I would say. It's not strictly evaluation, but to me, more like a mindset that you go into with the training. So societal benefits, how did the training and what people did as a result of this training impact the larger picture? And especially on things like anti-corruption compliance, I think you can make that claim and connect the dots. Can you measure whether me doing anti-corruption training for several companies in Kenya actually helped improve integrity environment in Kenya? Can I prove it scientifically, measure it? No, I can't. But it's still useful for both for you and for the participants to have that mindset. That this is also, yes, we're talking maybe about some fairly technical things, using some compliance jargon, but ultimately, what's the big picture? We want the company to benefit. And if the company benefits by being able to operate in a more sustainable way, to operate with integrity, that clearly has benefits or contributes to the benefit of the entire country, but by making the whole business environment less prone to corruption, and more conducive for more companies like that to operate with integrity.